What if the campsite you chose was never truly abandoned? What if while you're sleeping in your tent, something is watching you? Worse, what if that something isn't human at all? I'm Dylan. Welcome to Nightmare and Fear, where we get lost on the darkest paths of fear. Every day, I bring you a new story that might just steal your sleep. Our goal is to reach a dark family of 500 nightmare lovers. If you're into these kinds of tales, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. Now, let's dive into a nightmare that needed to be told. It was the end of summer. 4 of us, college friends, decided to do one last camping trip. We wanted something remote, isolated, untouched by the world. That's when we heard about Mirrorwood Lake. It wasn't on any map. We only found it mentioned once, in the final line of a deleted post on an old camping blog. If you're alone at the lake, don't look at your reflection. Obviously, that only made us more curious. We packed up, jumped in the car, and headed into the woods. The road narrowed into dirt, and eventually, we had to hike the rest of the way on foot. When we reached the lake, it was hauntingly still. The water looked like glass. But what struck us most was the number of old, rotting camp chairs scattered along the shore. There was no one there. But at some point, this place had been full. That first night, we sat around the fire. But once darkness settled in, things started to feel wrong. We heard splashes in the water, but the surface remained still. I caught the feeling of being watched. Switched my camera to night vision and scanned the trees. Eyes. Reflecting light. They showed up only through the camera, not to the naked eye. On the second night, I got up around 3 a.m. to check the lake alone. I stared into the water and noticed something off. My reflection moved with a delay. Then, suddenly, it smiled. I hadn't. I panicked and turned to run. But the entire campsite was gone. The tents, the fire, everything had vanished. I screamed for my friends, but the forest absorbed every sound. Eventually, I collapsed under a tree. When I woke up, it was morning. The tents were back. So were my friends. But they looked at me with fear. Josh said, "You disappeared last night. We searched everywhere." I told them what I'd seen, but they didn't believe me. That's when I noticed something horrifying. I pulled out my ID. My name had changed. Different last name. Different birthday. We tried to leave, but the woods had changed. No trail. No signal. GPS was dead. It felt like a loop, an inescapable maze. And each night, the lake crept closer. On the 4th day, Mia disappeared by the water. We only found her shoes. The next morning, we saw her, standing silently by the lake. But it wasn't Mia. Her eyes were black, her face frozen. She whispered, "Stay with me, in the mirror." Josh and I tried to run. Thought we made it out. Now I'm home. But when I look in the mirror, something's wrong. Sometimes, my reflection blinks when I don't. And slowly I feel it. I'm forgetting who I was, who I really am. So tell me, would you still go camping near a forgotten lake? If your reflection started acting on its own, would you still believe you're you? If you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to subscribe to Nightmare and Fear. Join our family of 500 nightmare lovers, and take a new step into darkness every week. I'm Dylan, and this was just the first of many nightmares to come. Hello everyone. What if the campsite you chose was never truly abandoned? What if, while you're sleeping in your tent, someone was watching you? And worse, What if that someone wasn't even human? I'm Dylan. Welcome to the darkest paths of fear. This is the Nightmare and Fear channel. Every day, I bring you a brand new story to keep you awake at night. Our goal is to reach a dark family of 500 members. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free. If you're ready, let's step into another nightmare that demands to be told. Last summer, my two cousins and I set out to explore a remote camping spot called Ashwater Ridge. It wasn't on Google Maps. We only found it through a scan page from an old hiking magazine, published in 1993. The article was torn, but one sentence was underlined in red ink. "You'll never hear the forest the same way again." We arrived around 5 p.m. There was no proper trail, just broken wooden signs, and moss-covered stones that looked like they once formed a path. It felt still. Too still. Even the birds didn't sing. As we unpacked, my cousin Elle pointed at something near the trees. A circle of stones. Perfectly placed. Too perfect. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of crunching leaves. I assumed it was an animal, until I realized the sound moved in circles around our tent. Slow. Deliberate. And then it stopped, right at the back of my tent. I held my breath. No footsteps. No rustling. Just breathing. But when I stepped out with my flashlight, there was nothing there. Elle was missing the next morning. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just her boots placed neatly by the lake, and a single word carved into the sand. Stay. My cousin Logan and I searched the entire day. But the forest felt like it was folding in on itself. No matter where we turned, we kept ending up at the same circle of stones. That night, I heard Elle's voice. Not calling for help, but laughing. Her laughter echoed from the trees, from the water, from beneath the earth. Then I saw her, standing by the stone circle. Her face wasn't hers anymore. Eyes completely black. Skin pale and tight, like wax stretched over a skull. She tilted her head and whispered, "You stayed." I don't remember how we left, or how Logan and I woke up in our own beds the next day. But we never found Elle, and we never spoke of it again. Only one thing still haunts me. That same word is now carved into the tree outside my house. Stay. Have you ever seen a camping crew that stayed silent all night long? Or heard a device that keeps whispering like a radio station while you're camping? What if, while everyone's silent, they all share the same dream on the same night? I'm Dylan. Welcome to Nightmare and Fear, where we lose ourselves in the darkest paths of terror. Every day, I bring you a new story that will keep you awake at night. Our goal is to reach a 500-strong dark family. If you enjoy this kind of story, don't forget to subscribe. It's completely free. If you're ready, let me tell you about tonight's tale. But this time, no one spoke. We found the perfect camping spot, Red Hollow Ridge. Close to the ruins of an old radio station, a place not even marked on maps. On our first night we were 4. Me, Lucas, Aaron, and Jamie. We were having fun. But after we put out the campfire, we heard it. TSSS, TSSS. It sounded like a radio frequency, static in the air. But there was no radio. Until Lucas found an old walkie-talkie buried in the dirt. It was rusty, nearly broken. But when he turned it on, it worked. And then a voice came through. "Don't leave without listening." The next morning, there was an eerie silence. No one spoke. I said, "Good morning," but everyone just stared at me. They couldn't speak. Their tongues wouldn't move, words wouldn't come out. But the strangest thing was, they didn't find this odd. Lucas wrote in my notebook. We had the same dream. The same voice. That night, I turned on the walkie-talkie again. This time, it was clearer. We are watching you. If you hear silence, the transition begins. The transition? At that exact moment, the entire camp went dark. The fire didn't go out. The sky went dark. There were no stars. No moon. Just darkness. And then, the whispers started. Not from outside. Inside my head. Stay silent. We'll take your place. Erin disappeared in the middle of the night. The voice on the walkie-talkie whispered her name. Erin has succeeded. The next morning, her tent was still there. But inside, there was a note in her handwriting. I'm already somewhere else. No more voices. That's when I realized. This camp was some kind of gateway. If you speak, you're out. If you stay silent, they take you. Lucas also vanished. Jamie tied herself up, stuffing a rag in her mouth to avoid speaking. But she was gone too. I was left alone. I tried to talk on the walkie-talkie, but now it only gave off static. Years passed. Yes, years. But I'm still here. My face has aged, but my feelings remain the same. Every night, I hear the same voice. Next, Dylan. Stay silent. If everyone at a camp is dreaming the same dream, that's not a camp. If someone feeds on silence, that's a gateway. An end. What about you? When would you stop speaking? I'm Dylan. If you enjoyed this darkness, make sure to subscribe to Nightmare and Fear. Join our 500-strong Nightmare family. Every week, a new darkness, a new silence awaits you. I'm Dylan. Welcome to Nightmare and Fear, where we lose ourselves in the darkest paths of terror. Every day, I bring you a new story that will keep you awake at night. Our goal is to reach a 500-strong dark family. If you enjoyed this kind of story, don't forget to subscribe. It's completely free. If you're ready, let me tell you about tonight's tale. But this time, no one spoke. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway, just me and 3 of my closest friends. We'd been talking about this trip for months, picking the spot carefully, planning the route meticulously. We wanted a place that was remote, where we could disconnect from the world and just enjoy nature. After all, what's the point of camping if not to be alone with your thoughts? We found Cedar Grove, a small, barely known spot tucked deep in the woods, an area with no signal, no distractions. A place where you couldn't even get lost if you tried. But the moment we arrived, something felt off. The air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't explain. The trees were tall, reaching above us like sentinels, but the atmosphere was unnervingly still. There was no sound, no birds, no rustling leaves. It was like the forest was holding its breath. We shrugged it off as the quiet of the wilderness, but it didn't sit right with me. As the sun began to set, we set up camp. The light faded quickly, and as the campfire flickered to life, the quiet continued. I didn't notice it right away, but one of my friends, Sarah, pointed out the strange carvings in the tree trunks. They weren't like any symbols I'd ever seen before. They weren't made by animals or even by someone else camping there. These were deliberately etched into the bark, as though someone had used a blade to carve them. Maybe just some locals, Sarah said, trying to keep the mood light. But they didn't look like anything local. They looked ancient. The symbols were vaguely familiar, like I had seen them somewhere, but I couldn't place where. As we sat around the fire, one of my other friends, Matt, noticed something else, a sound. At first, it was just the crackling of the fire, the usual noise of wood burning, but then, a soft whisper. It was so faint at first, we thought it was just the wind. But as we listened harder, it became clearer. It sounded like a voice. But there was no one else around. That night, I lay in my tent, unable to sleep. I heard the whispers again. This time, they were louder, more distinct. I couldn't make out the words, but they were close, too close. It was like someone was standing right outside my tent, just waiting for me to listen. I told myself it was nothing. It was just the wind, or maybe the trees creaking in the night. But it didn't feel like that. In the middle of the night, I heard it again, but this time, it wasn't just one voice. There were multiple whispers, overlapping, speaking in a language I didn't understand. The sound was maddening, each voice distinct yet blending together in a chorus of unintelligible words. I got up, shaking, and opened the flap of my tent. The campfire was out, but I could still see the faint outline of the trees around me. The whispers seemed to be coming from deeper within the woods, just beyond the trees. I wasn't alone. In the morning, we gathered around the fire. We were all on edge, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Did anyone else hear those voices?" I asked, my voice shaky. The others nodded, their faces pale. "I thought I was the only one," Matt confessed. "I didn't want to say anything. But I couldn't sleep either." Sarah looked at the markings on the trees again, and a shiver ran down my spine. I had to know what they meant. We decided to explore deeper into the woods, hoping that whatever was out there would answer our questions. As we ventured further into the trees, the whispers grew louder. But they weren't the same as before. They were darker now, more ominous. And then, we found it. At the center of the woods, just beyond a thicket of trees, we came upon a clearing. In the middle stood an old stone structure, half buried in the earth, covered in moss. It was like a shrine, or a monument, but there was something wrong about it. The whispers were deafening now, all around us. They seemed to be coming from the stones themselves, like the very ground was alive, speaking to us in a language we couldn't comprehend. And that's when we saw it. A figure. It was standing just behind the stones, its face obscured by a cloak of shadows. It was tall, unnaturally so, and it was staring directly at us, its head tilting slightly as if studying us. The whispers stopped. Suddenly, everything went silent. The wind, the trees, even our own breathing, all fell away. The only thing left was the figure. It raised one long, thin arm and pointed directly at me. Panic hit me like a wave. I turned and ran, not even looking back. My friends were right behind me, but the fear had already taken hold of all of us. We didn't stop running until we reached the camp. When we got back to the site, we packed up in silence. There was no conversation, no words spoken. We didn't even look at each other. We just grabbed our things and left, not daring to stop or look around. As we drove away, I glanced back at the forest one last time. The trees stood silent, watching us leave. And I swear, I saw that figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching us go. We never spoke of that night again. None of us. But I still hear the whispers sometimes. In the quiet of the night, when the world is still. And sometimes I swear I hear that same figure in my dreams, standing just outside my window, waiting. And it always asks the same question. "Why did you leave?" It was a spontaneous decision. 4 of us, tired of city life and seeking an escape, decided to take a camping trip to a secluded spot we'd found on an old map. It was located in the middle of nowhere, far away from the buzzing crowds of people. There was no cell service and no internet. Just nature. Just us. We arrived in the late afternoon, setting up our tents near a small creek. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine filled our lungs. The sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting a soft orange glow over the camp. It was peaceful, too peaceful. But we were eager to relax and start the fire. As night began to fall, we huddled around the campfire, telling stories and laughing. The kind of stories you tell around a fire, ghost stories, mostly, when the darkness seems to come alive. But in the back of my mind, something didn't feel quite right. I noticed something strange in the distance. There were lights flickering on and off, far beyond the tree line, deep in the forest. I didn't mention it at first. Maybe someone else was camping, or maybe it was just the reflection of the stars. But as the minutes passed, the lights didn't move. They just flickered, still as a painting in the distance. As I stared at the lights, I felt a chill creep up my spine. I glanced around, trying to gauge if anyone else had noticed. But my friends were too busy with their own conversations, oblivious to what I was seeing. Then, one of my friends, Jake, pointed at the same spot. "Do you see that?" he asked. "What the hell is that?" We all stood up and peered into the dark woods. The lights flickered again. There were 3 of them, seemingly in a perfect row. Not like flashlights, but something different, almost like they were floating. "Maybe it's just someone else camping," Sarah suggested. "They've probably got lanterns or something." But the way they stayed still, never moving, made me uneasy. And the way they flickered in and out, it wasn't natural. It was like they were watching us. We decided to ignore it, telling ourselves it was just some weird trick of the light. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was out there, and whatever it wasn't friendly. That night, I lay in my tent, unable to sleep. The sound of the creek was soothing, but it couldn't quiet the unease I felt in my chest. I kept thinking about those lights. Suddenly, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a faint tapping on the side of my tent. It was quiet at first, almost like a breeze brushing against the fabric. But then it grew louder, more deliberate. Like someone, or something, was tapping from the outside. I held my breath, waiting. The tap stopped. My heart was pounding now. I couldn't just lie there. I had to see what was going on. I crawled out of my tent, hoping to find nothing. But as soon as I stepped outside, I froze. The lights were gone. But then, something moved in the trees. Not a breeze, not an animal, but something deliberate. Something large. I turned back to my tent and shouted for my friends. "Jake! Sarah! Ryan!" They stumbled out of their tents, groggy and confused. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "There's something out there," I said, my voice shaking. "I heard something, and those lights are gone. But something's out there." We grabbed our flashlights and began scanning the woods. The area was still. Too still. But I could feel it, the sense that something was lurking, just beyond the trees. We didn't know what it was, but it was watching us. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. We kept scanning the area, trying to reassure each other. But the more we searched, the more the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, one of the lights returned. It wasn't the same lights we had seen earlier. This one was different, brighter, larger, moving toward us. It hovered in the air, making no sound. My heart raced. "It's coming closer," I whispered. Jake, who was always the brave one, stepped forward. "It's just a trick of the light. Let's not overreact." But the closer the light got, the more unnatural it seemed. It wasn't floating in any way I recognized. It moved like it was alive, an entity, not just a source of light. and then it disappeared. Vanished into the night without a trace. "Where the hell did it go?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. We all stood there in silence, unsure of what we had just seen. But the feeling of dread hadn't left. If anything, it had gotten stronger. We didn't waste any more time. We packed our things quickly, each of us looking over our shoulders, the unease growing with every second. But we didn't look back as we drove away. We never talked about that night again. We tried to convince ourselves it was just an illusion, a product of our overactive imaginations. But no matter how hard we tried to explain it, the fear never truly went away. What were those lights? Who or what was out there in the woods? To this day, I still wonder if we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or if we encountered something far worse. The woods are quiet now, but I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the whispers of the night, the ones that came from the darkness.